Because of the coronavirus, there's a massive shutdown, but one exception to that is the counting for the 2020 census. Getting a full count can make a difference when it comes to political representation and federal funding. That especially goes for parts of Boston with a history of being undercounted, such as Roxbury. That's why government efforts are being supplemented at the grassroots level by organizations such as the Madison Park Development Corporation. To tell us about that is a fellow from the corporation, Eva Ackerman. Thank you very much for being with us, Eva.
Pleasure joining you. Thank you for having me.
I want to talk about what you had planned to do with the census effort originally before we had the shutdown and the virus outbreak. What was that supposed to be like?
Definitely. So just a little background on the census. The census aims to count every person living in the United States and collect their demographic data. And this information guides all kinds of important decisions, including how many congressional representatives each state gets and how state and local governments spend resources. And as you mentioned before, Roxbury has been a historically undercounted neighborhood. In 2010, Roxbury had about a 70% response rate and has a high risk of undercount in 2020. So at Madison Park Development Corporation, for the past almost year at this point, we've been engaging resident leaders in getting the word out about the census. We've held a number of events about the census, created a census committee of both residents in the community who are doing this work and young people who are engaged in our different programs. And that was supposed to include door knocking on every household to get the word out about the census, holding a number of events, including creative events such as bingo night, where we help people fill out the census. We also wanted to hold events that were specifically in Spanish, so that Spanish speakers in our development could get the information about the census.
Well, one of the things it's well known about censuses is that they matter in terms of political districting, especially for congressional districts. Currently, this district is represented by Anna Presley. She was a historic case because she's the first woman of color to represent a district in Massachusetts. But how does a census relate to that? The fact that she had the kind of district to represent in the first place?
Yes, so this Massachusetts isn't likely to lose or gain a seat in the federal House of Representatives based on the census. But if vulnerable populations go undercounted within Massachusetts, they risk being underrepresented in state and local offices when local political board boundaries are redrawn. So in the case of Ayanna Presley, I've experienced in Roxbury specifically that people are really excited about a candidate like her who represents the neighborhood. And we need to make sure that everyone is counted so that when political boundaries are redrawn, they're representative of the people who are actually living in these neighborhoods.
Census figures also tell us about things like income levels. Why is that important for Roxbury?
In terms of income levels, the census is important. I mean, we know that in 2015, the median household income in Roxbury was roughly $25,000 compared to the Boston median of $55,000. And because the census, a lot of it is about ensuring that the federal government funding goes to the people and projects it's intended to support, funding like funding for services including healthy food, childcare, Head Start, and Section 8 vouchers for low-income families. We want to know what the median income is in order to make sure this funding is going to the right places and the right people.
Well, ordinarily, when people don't respond to the census themselves and get online and give the information, you need to go out and do some other things, like maybe knocking on doors. Now, in a time like this, with human contact widely discouraged, how do you do that kind of outreach?
Yes, so the enumerators, as you mentioned, normally go out. That has been suspended, but also extended. So hopefully enumerators can start going out The revised schedule says that it will be March 16th to May 14th. But in terms of the outreach that we're doing at Madison Park, we're hoping to call everyone. Do both by doing robocalls, so literally calling every single resident, and also doing one-on-one outreach. The census committee that I mentioned before is a great group of people who are dedicated to the community, and they are pledging to call people and hopefully getting the message out that way. We've also been thinking about different social media tactics that we can use to get the message out. And in addition to that, sending out more mailings about the census.
Well, for people who are used to doing things online, if you respond that way to the census, it's pretty painless. I did it. It really did take me less than 10 minutes. But there are other people who are not as well practiced in that. They might not even have an internet connection. How do you help somebody like that?
So you can actually call in as well. You said already that it's easy to do online, but for folks who cannot, there are phone lines in 12 different languages. The English phone line is 844-330-2020. And the Spanish phone line, which is also has been super helpful, is 844-468-2020. And supposedly I did not do it on the phone, but I've spoken to a number of residents who don't have access to the internet right now, and it also takes around 5 to 10 minutes.
Now, of course, we've always been taught since we were growing up that the census was a duty for all Americans. Now, some people might take that to mean, well, you have to be a citizen to do this or something like that. But actually, that's not true. I mean, this is really for everybody. You trying to get that out to people?
Yes, absolutely. And that's also why we're trying to make this available and accessible in different languages so that people who are undocumented in our communities also know that they should be counted and deserve to be counted because they deserve the resources. And Massachusetts should be getting the funding to help ensure that everyone gets the resources that they need.
What about people who are immigrants? They're worried about their status. They're worried about almost any kind of contact with something connected with the government. How do you reassure them about the census?
Yeah, so we talk a lot about confidentiality in the census and how the data is confidential. Federal law protects your census responses, and your responses can only be used to provide statistics. So the census cannot share any information with immigration enforcement agencies, law enforcement agencies, or allow it to be used to determine eligibility for government benefits. And that is something that we discuss a lot when we're going out and doing outreach in the communities.
I want to turn to another topic because right now life is very different for people in a lot of communities. What do you see in the areas served by the Madison Park Development Corporation?
Yeah, I mean, people are staying indoors who I've spoken to, and something that I've noticed is loneliness, especially a lot of the residents that we've spoken to are older, maybe living alone. So we've been trying to figure out how to connect people on the phone so that they can have people to talk to. Another thing is that we've been talking a lot about is how to ensure that food is distributed to people. So at Madison Park, we've been increasing threefold the number of residents we're distributing food to. Prior to this, we were surveying about 100 households, and now we're reaching 300 households, and we're confirmed to do weekly distribution now instead of bi-weekly distribution. So the same issues that people have had before are now exacerbated by a lot of things closing.
When you say you need to help more people, is this because they're out of work and don't have as much money, or is it maybe because it is more difficult for them to get out someplace and procure the food?
I think both. The residents I've spoken to may be scared to leave the house, are in vulnerable situations, maybe over 60 or be immunocompromised. And then, yes, there are people who have been losing their jobs, who maybe not have the same hours that they have had before.
Now, I'm trying to imagine what you're doing at Madison Park, because you're distributing the food means you're going to people's apartments, or at least pretty close to them. Maybe you're also getting in one place and packaging the food to get it ready. What's that like for people?
So we are using the Do It Center, which is a Madison Park property. It's close to programming, which is consistent with current guidelines. But we're using it as a safe staging area that allows for proper social distancing and clean spaces for volunteers to package food for delivery. So we're trying to be creative about how to do this safely and using the spaces that we already have available to us.
Finally, we should mention that if you're trying to get to some way to help people with the census, is there a way that they can get in touch with the corporation, or if you need some volunteers to help you with that, what's the best way for them to follow that up?
Absolutely. You should feel free to contact me. My email is eackerman@madisonpark.org, or you can call me at 617-997-6287 for more information about the census and how to get involved.
And Eva, I want to make sure I remember this correctly. Ackerman, Acker, and Madison Park is Madison Dash Park?
Yes, Madison Dash Park.
You
Apologies.
got it.